What's going on, guys, and welcome to Moto City. I'm Kyle Bradshaw, and today on episode 12 of Motoz Monday, we're taking a look at tire tubes. That's right, Motoz is also in the tire tube business. I mean, if you're going to have tires, you might as well have tubes. Now, not just any tube is good. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Motoz tubes specifically to begin with, the features, benefits, specs, and then we're going to compare those with some of the other more prominent tubes in the motorcycle space. Now the first thing, the number one thing that sets Motoz tubes apart from most of the other tubes out there is the fact that they are made of a 100% high quality natural rubber. That's right, these tubes are made of 100% natural rubber so that they are not only more puncture resistant, but they're also more stretchable and pliable. That really is the key when it comes to how a tube performs. Now, not only do these tubes have high quality ingredients that make them up, they are also sized to be the thickness that they're advertised at their maximum volume. That's right, if you're running a 140, 70, 18, and you put the 140 tube in, it's not like you're taking a 110 and blowing it up to a 140 that's making it get thinner and thinner and thinner as it gets to that tire size that it is also spec'd for. These tubes here, the 140 tube at the 140 size is going to be the 3 or 4 millimeter thickness that you come to expect, or that you would want to expect out of the tube that you've just purchased. Now that's going to be great for two different reasons. The first, obviously, is the rubber is going to be as thick as you want it or expect it to be when it's in its fully inflated capacity. The other reason that that's important is the fact that there is much less stress put on a tube when it is built that way. If you take a thinner tube or a smaller tube and expand it out, that tube is being pushed to its limit, and it's just like a balloon. Underflated and balloon's gonna flex and move. You can even poke an underflated balloon sometimes with a dull pencil, and it's gonna go in, it's gonna come back out, and it's not gonna pop. Versus a balloon that's being overinflated or stretched really tight, you touch that thing with even a dull object and that thing's going to explode and pop extremely quickly. The same type of methodology works with tire tubes. So a question I get all the time, what tube do you carry with you, Kyle, when you're out there on the trail for a flat repair or replacement? I carry with me the Motoz standard duty 1.6 millimeter tube. It's going to be the smallest, lightest, most packable tube that will allow me to get air back in the tire so I can get to my next destination. Now, when I get home, I'm absolutely going to swap that tube out for either a heavy duty tube or an Uber heavy duty tube, so whatever problem got caused to begin with is alleviated and we don't have to deal with another tire change out there on the trail. Now, really quick, before we jump into the feature, specs, and benefits of these tubes, I want to talk about one topic of conversation. And that's going to be a rumor that I hear a lot that says, oh my gosh, if you ride your bike on road at speed, you cannot put a heavy duty tube in it, or especially an Uber duty or an ultra duty tube. That's not the case. Now, the reason they say you shouldn't run a heavy duty or an ultra heavy duty tube on the street is the fact that you get lots of friction at high speed, and that friction is going to create a lot of heat to build up. While that is the case, I can personally say that I've never had a failure due to that type of riding. On my adventure bike, my 950 Super Enduro, I've been running heavy duty tubes from the beginning, and I have, I need to find some wood, never had a failure on that bike out there in the field. Now, when changing my tires, when taking the wheel apart and actually looking at the tube while doing tire changes, I have noticed creases on the tube itself. So when I've been in super low pressure situations and that tire and the tube and the rim kind of make contact inside the cavity of the tire itself, my tube has done its job. It's deflected that impact, it is not pinched, it is not cracked, and it has allowed me to go over all of the obstacles that I ever wanted to go over. Now, we started out this video talking about the all-natural rubber construction of Motoz tubes. Now, that is extremely important. I don't know the makeup of the tubes here behind me, but I can tell you that Motoz tubes are 100% natural rubber. Many tubes are made of butyl or synthetic rubber, which is an artificial material and it lacks the natural rubber characteristics. This means that when butyl tubes puncture, they typically tend to split and tear, and sometimes they're almost impossible to patch or repair. Now that is not what you want when you're miles from home. Natural rubber tubes, on the opposite, repair and patch extremely easily, and that's why Motoz uses 100% natural rubber. They're not cheap, but they aren't expensive for what you get. The 1.6mm standard series tube is 1.6mm thick and is stronger than most rival heavy-duty tubes. It's made of a 100% all-natural rubber, and it's suited for a wide range of multi-purpose applications, including carrying as a spare. The 3mm heavy-duty racing tube is 3mm thick, and it is heavy-duty, and it has been specifically designed for intense motocross or MX or dirt bike racing. The 4mm Uber Duty tube is an ultra heavy-duty tube. It features a 4mm ultra duty construction and is specifically designed for desert, safari, and enduro racing. Now, a traditional 1.5 to 1.8mm tube is going to look something like this. This here is a tube from Sedona. You can see it's extremely thin, and this, I can tell you, is not an all-natural rubber tube. Just the feel that I have on this, it feels a little bit plasticky, if you will. And taking the rubber itself and trying to pull it or stretch it, it definitely doesn't have the stretch characteristics that I'm feeling in some of the other tubes here on the table. And that's really what sets a really high quality tube apart. You can feel the compound of the rubber when you hold it in your hands. You can feel how sticky it is, you can feel how pliable it is, how stretchy it is, and that's really going to be what determines how good your ride is out there on the trail. Now, the downside to these larger, all-natural, heavy-duty tubes is the fact that they are going to weigh a little bit more than tubes made of different substances. The plasticky material is lighter, but it is not as robust as you're going to get with an all-natural rubber tube. Now, the 4mm heavy-duty tube from Michelin was the standard in heavy-duty tubes for a really long time. They do a phenomenal job, and that really is the standard at which Motoz went to the drawing board and said, we need to create a tube at least, if not better, than the Michelin's. Now, in order to see how thick these tubes really are they really 4mm thick, or are they slightly less? So if this tire is a 4mm thickness, and I take my tire tread depth gauge and set it on top, making sure that there's no slack between the layers, and push down like this, I should get an 8mm reading on my tread depth gauge. I went ahead and did that same test with all of the tubes that you see here on the table. Now, for the durometer reading, I laid the tube flat on the table and I took the durometer and I pushed it down on top of the tube and let it sit for a second. That's going to tell me how soft or squishy or pliable that rubber material is on top. Now, there were varying results, but I was actually surprised at how close all of these tubes fell into that mix. They really started at 49 and went up to 54. Now, if you want to speak generalities, basically a cheap, inexpensive, less than 2mm tube is going to weigh somewhere around 1.5 pounds. And then we jump up to the heavy-duty tubes, like this guy right here. We're looking at about 2 pounds for a front, 3 pounds for a rear. And then we move up to the Uber Duty, or the 4mm range. We're looking at right around 3 pounds for a front and 4 pounds for a rear. Now, all the sizes that I'm testing today are going to be a 90-90-21 front and a 140-80-18 for the rear. I just want you to see, I want to explain what I was looking at here or noticing when handling the Motoz tube versus the Michelin tube. Again, the Michelin is the gold standard when it comes to tubes, but just take a look here at the amount of rubber or the bend, the thickness of the bend that you have here on these two tubes. You notice that the Tractionator tube from Motoz is significantly thicker than that of the Michelin tube. Now, the interesting part about that is the fact that the Michelin tube is actually heavier. That's right. So the Motoz tube comes in at 4 pounds 3 ounces for this 18-inch rear, and the Michelin came in at 4 pounds 10 ounces. I was actually shocked to see that when actually holding these in my hands and looking at the girth, that the Motoz had as compared to the Michelin. Now when it comes to the durometer reading, they both came in at 50 on the durometer reader, but the interesting thing was the actual thickness test that I did. Now when it came to the tread depth thickness, or the thickness of this tube, the Motoz came in at 9mm and the Michelin came in at 7mm. And that would totally explain the thickness difference that we're seeing between these tubes. We're talking about a 2mm difference between the Motoz and the Michelin. Again, I'm not bagging on the Michelin. Michelin has been the gold standard, or is the gold standard when it comes to off-road tubes. I'm just showing you the differences that we're seeing when we're comparing these tubes side by side. Now I'm picking up the front tubes and taking a look at them. The difference was even more striking than I found on the rear, and I thought this was quite interesting. The Michelin front tube measured in at 6mm, whereas the Motoz front tube measured in at 9mm. And then we went to the durometer reading. The Michelin tube was actually 49 on the durometer, and the Motoz was 50. So this guy gave me a little bit more compression, or a little bit more flexibility than I saw on the Motoz tube. I thought that was pretty interesting. The front Motoz was heavier, weighing in at 3 pounds 9 ounces, versus the Michelin that came in at 2 pounds 13 ounces. Now these two tubes are the leaders in the industry when it comes to the most protective tube that you can put in your motorcycle. Enduro guys, desert guys, rally guys, the heavy duty Michelin has been the go-to for quite a long time. Now in this video, I'm not saying that one tube is better than the other. I'm just giving you the specs, the hard, cold facts of how these tires weigh in when compared one to another. They're both fantastic tires. I've run the Michelin for years and I've never had a failure. Likewise, I've been running the Motoz for about 5 years now, and I've never had a failure either. And there you have it, guys. That there is Motoz Monday number 12, talking about tubes, tire tubes. There's all kinds of different tubes out there, but I can tell you from my experience, Motoz all-natural tubes are definitely a great way to go. They have great stretch, they have great puncture resistance, and I have found great longevity coming from these tubes. Again, they maintain their actual thickness at full volumized pressures, which makes sure that you have the most rubber possible between you and either the road or the trail. Now, if you want to see any of these tubes that we talked about today, please take a look at the description down below. There are links to each of these tubes so that you can be outfitted with whichever one of these tubes you'd like to run on your next ride. Anyway, I'm Bradshaw. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, take care and ride safe out there.